The crystal chandelier above our dining table cast fractured light across my untouched plate, turning the expensive porcelain into something that looked like shattered glass. I traced my finger along the gold rim, remembering when Dante had presented me with this entire set, 12 place settings of bone china that cost more than my mother's annual salary. Back then, 6 months into our marriage, I'd been foolish enough to think such gifts meant something beyond possession. My phone buzzed against the mahogany surface. Another message from my doctor's office, the third one this week. I should call them back. I would call them back. Tomorrow, maybe, when my hand stopped shaking long enough to dial the number without Dante's security detail monitoring every keystroke, every breath, every thought that dared to exist outside his control. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 8, its deep chime echoing through our penthouse like a death knell. Dante had promised to be home by 7. Then 7:30. Now the food had gone cold, congealing on expensive plates that reflected my pale face back at me. A ghost, haunting her own life. I stood, my silk dress whispering against my thighs as I moved toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 23 stories below, ordinary people lived ordinary lives, unaware that monsters wore Italian suits and spoke in soft voices that could order death between sips of aged whiskey. The glass felt cool against my forehead, a small relief from the fever that had been plaguing me for weeks. My reflection stared back, hollow-eyed and gaunt. When had I become this translucent thing? This shadow wife who arranged flowers and attended charity galas while her husband's empire drowned the city in blood and corruption? I barely recognized the woman I'd been 2 years ago, the struggling artist who'd waitressed at his exclusive restaurant, who'd been foolish enough to believe that a man like Dante Valentino could love anything beyond power. The penthouse felt like a mausoleum tonight, all marble surfaces and echoing silence. Even the usual rotation of security guards seemed absent, though I knew they were there, invisible sentinels monitoring my prison. Dante had grown more paranoid in recent months, doubling the surveillance, questioning my every movement. Last week, he'd fired 3 guards for allowing me to visit my mother unescorted. The memory of their terrified faces still haunted my dreams. My phone buzzed again. Not the doctor this time, but worse. My mother, asking if I'd remembered to take my medication. What medication? The question burned in my mind, unanswered, because the truth was I hadn't been to see her in 3 weeks. Dante had forbidden it after she'd made the mistake of asking why I looked so tired, so thin, so much like a woman slowly disappearing. I typed a quick response, something vague about being busy with Dante's business functions, then deleted it. Every text message, every phone call, everything ran through systems Dante's people monitored. Nothing in my life belonged to me anymore. Not even the words I chose to speak. The elevator chimed and my heart seized. He was home. But the footsteps that crossed the marble foyer were too light, too hesitant. Sophia, Dante's housekeeper, appeared in the dining room doorway, her weathered face etched with something that looked almost like pity. "Mrs. Valentino," she said softly, her accent thicker than usual. "Mr. Valentino called. He will be late. Business dinner at Armani's." Armani's. The restaurant where we'd met, where I'd served him wine with trembling hands while he'd watched me with those dark, fathomless eyes that promised both salvation and damnation. Where he'd left $1,000 tips and waited for me after my shift, his black SUV idling at the curb like a predator waiting to strike. "Did he say when he'd be home?" My voice sounded foreign, scraped raw. Sophia's gaze dropped. "No, signora." He said not to wait up. After she left, I stood in the center of that obscenely expensive dining room and felt something crack inside my chest, not my heart. That had broken months ago, ground into dust beneath the weight of Dante's obsessive love. This was something deeper, something that had been holding the fragments of myself together. I walked to Dante's study, my feet carrying me there on autopilot. The door was always locked, but I knew where he kept the key, hidden inside a hollowed-out book on the shelf, because even monsters believed in irony. My fingers shook as I retrieved it, as I slipped it into the lock and turned. The room smelled like him, sandalwood cologne, aged leather, and something metallic that I'd learned not to question. His desk stood like an altar to power, covered in files I wasn't supposed to see, phones I wasn't supposed to touch, secrets that could bury us both. I shouldn't have looked. Some part of me, the part that still remembered self-preservation, screamed to turn back. But I was so tired of not knowing, so exhausted by the weight of deliberate ignorance. My hands found a folder marked personal, and I opened it before courage could abandon me. Photographs spilled across the mahogany surface. Me, hundreds of images of me, taken from angles and distances that turned my stomach. Walking to the store, having coffee with my mother, standing at this very window, unaware I was being watched. The earliest ones dated back 3 years, a full year before we'd met. He'd been stalking me, hunting me, choosing me long before I'd had any say in the matter. Beneath the photos, a document. Medical records. My medical records, from the clinic I'd visited last month when the exhaustion became too much to ignore. How had he gotten these? The words on the page blurred, then sharpened, then blurred again as my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. Advanced stage. Aggressive treatment required. Prognosis uncertain without immediate intervention. The papers slipped from my fingers, floating to the floor like dead leaves. I pressed my palm against the desk, trying to steady myself against the wave of vertigo that threatened to pull me under. This couldn't be right. I felt tired, yes, but not dying. Not leaving. Not yet. My phone rang, the sound piercing through the cotton, filling my head. Dante's name flashed across the screen, his contact photo showing him in one of those rare, unguarded moments when his face softened into something almost human. I answered, my voice barely a whisper. Dante? Bella. His voice wrapped around me even through the phone line, rich and dark as expensive wine. I need you to listen carefully. Marco is coming to get you. Pack a bag. Essentials only. We're leaving the city tonight. What? Why? Dante, Don't question me, Elena. The softness evaporated, replaced by the steel I'd learned to fear. There's been a development. You're not safe in the penthouse anymore. Marco will be there in 15 minutes. Be ready. I found the photos. The words escaped before I could stop them, before I could remember all the reasons why honesty with Dante was a luxury I couldn't afford, and the medical records. You've been watching me for years. You knew about my health before I did. Silence stretched between us, heavy with implications I didn't want to explore. In the background, I heard music, the gentle clink of silverware against china, a woman's laugh, light and carefree in a way I couldn't remember ever being. Who's with you? I asked, though I already knew. His secretary, Isabella, the woman with legs that went on forever, and loyalty that ran deep enough to die for. The woman who looked at Dante like he'd hung the stars, who'd never have medical records hidden in his desk because she'd never be careless enough to get sick. Elena, this isn't the time. Tell me the truth. My voice cracked. Just once, tell me the truth. Did you ever love me, or was I just another acquisition? Another piece of property to own and control? I heard him exhale, heard the scrape of his chair against hardwood. Pack your bag. Marco will explain everything. I'll be home within the hour. No. The word felt foreign on my tongue, dangerous and liberating in equal measure. I want to know now, Dante, before your guards arrive, before you can spin this into something palatable. Why me? Why stalk me for a year, marry me, cage me, if you were just going to... Another laugh in the background, closer this time. Isabella saying something I couldn't quite make out, her voice warm with wine and familiarity. I have to go, Dante said. And beneath the command, I heard something that might have been regret. Or perhaps that was wishful thinking. The dying gasps of a heart that refused to accept it had never been treasured. We'll discuss this when I get home. Stay in the penthouse. Don't open the door for anyone except Marco. Dante, please. The line went dead. I stood in his study, surrounded by evidence of his obsession, my medical death sentence scattered at my feet, and felt something inside me finally, irrevocably break. Not the slow fracture I'd been experiencing for months, but a clean snap, the kind that either killed you or set you free. My hands moved without conscious thought, gathering the photos, the medical records, stuffing them into my purse. Evidence, proof. Of what? I wasn't sure, but some instinct told me I'd need them. That whatever was coming, whatever development had sent Dante running, I'd need every weapon I could find. The elevator chimed again. Too soon for Marco. Dante had said 15 minutes, and barely 5 had passed. I moved to the study doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. The penthouse had gone silent, that particular quality of quiet that preceded violence. No Sophia bustling in the kitchen. No guards making their rounds. Just silence, thick and suffocating. Footsteps in the hallway, but these weren't Marco's familiar heavy tread. These were lighter, quicker, moving with purpose toward Dante's study. I pressed myself against the wall, searching for a weapon, anything. My fingers closed around a letter opener on Dante's desk. Ridiculous, bringing a knife to a gunfight, but it was all I had. The footsteps stopped outside the door. "Mrs. Valentino?" A woman's voice, accented and unfamiliar. "We need to talk about your husband." I didn't lower the letter opener, though my grip had grown slick with perspiration. The woman who stood in the doorway looked nothing like the armed assassin my imagination had conjured. She wore a nurse's scrubs beneath a worn winter coat, her graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. But in Dante's world, death wore many disguises, and the kindest faces often hid the cruelest intentions. "How did you get past security?" My voice emerged steadier than I felt. The letter opener raised between us like a talisman against whatever she represented. "Your husband's men let me through." She raised her hands slowly, showing empty palms. "My name is Dr. Patricia Moreau. I'm the oncologist who's been trying to reach you for 3 weeks. The letter opener wavered. "That's impossible. My husband would never—" "Your husband has been intercepting your calls, Mrs. Valentino. Redirecting your appointments. When you missed your 3rd scheduled consultation, I decided hospital protocol could go to hell." She took a careful step forward, her eyes, warm brown and impossibly weary, fixed on mine. "You have stage 3 lymphoma. Without treatment, you have perhaps 6 months. With aggressive chemotherapy started immediately, your survival rate increases to 70%. The room tilted. I gripped the desk, my knuckles white against the dark wood. 6 months. The words echoed in my skull, bouncing against bone, refusing to settle into anything resembling comprehension. "You're lying." But even as I said it, I remembered the exhaustion, the night sweats, the weight loss Dante had attributed to stress, the way he'd been watching me lately, his obsession taking on a frantic quality, as though he were trying to memorize my face before it disappeared. He wouldn't keep something like this from me. He's possessive, controlling, but he wouldn't he? Dr. Moreau moved closer, her expression shifting from professional concern to something rawer. "Mrs. Valentino, I've treated 3 other women connected to your husband's organization. 2 of them are dead, not from their illnesses, but because powerful men decided medical treatment was inconvenient to their business operations. The 3rd disappeared before her first chemotherapy session. We found her body in the river 6 weeks later." Nausea rolled through me. I pressed my free hand against my stomach, feeling the sharp jut of ribs that hadn't been visible 3 months ago. How had I not seen it? How had I explained away my own deterioration? Because I'd wanted to believe Dante's lies. Because acknowledging the truth meant acknowledging everything else, the monster I'd married, the prison I'd walked into willingly, the life I'd surrendered for the illusion of love. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "If my husband is as dangerous as you claim, why risk coming here?" Something flickered across her face. Grief, perhaps, or old rage finally finding its target, because the 3rd woman was my daughter, because she believed her husband when he said he'd take care of everything, that doctors were unnecessary, that his love was enough to cure her, because I watched her waste away in a gilded cage while I begged her to run. Her voice cracked. "I won't stand by and watch another woman make the same mistake." The elevator chimed. This time, the footsteps were unmistakable. Marco's heavy boots, accompanied by at least 2 others, Dante's inner circle, arriving to collect his wayward wife. Dr. Moreau pulled a card from her pocket, pressing it into my palm. "There's a car waiting in the service entrance. My colleague, Dr. Ramos. He'll take you to a facility outside the city, somewhere your husband's reach doesn't extend. We can start treatment tonight. I can't just leave." The words sounded absurd even to my own ears. Defending captivity, arguing for my own imprisonment. "Dante will find me. He always finds me. Then you'll die here." She said it without inflection, a simple statement of fact, slowly, painfully, while he watches and pretends he's protecting you. Is that really what you want, Mrs. Valentino? To let him own even your death? Marco's voice carried from the foyer, speaking rapid Italian into his phone. They'd be in the study within seconds, and whatever slim window of possibility Dr. Moreau represented would close forever. I looked down at the card in my hand. An address in Connecticut, hours away from Dante's territory. A phone number written in neat, precise script. A chance, however slim, to reclaim something that had stopped belonging to me the moment I'd accepted Dante's ring. Go, I whispered, before they see you. If Dante discovers you came here. He already knows. She smiled, sad and knowing. I called his office this afternoon, told his secretary exactly what I intended to do. Your husband declined to stop me. Make of that what you will. She left through the study's side door, the one that led to the servants' corridor, disappearing into the architectural maze of the penthouse like a ghost. I slipped her card into my bra, the only place Dante's cameras didn't reach, and dropped the letter opener back onto his desk. Marco filled the doorway moments later, his bulk blocking out the light. He'd been with Dante since before our marriage, a mountain of scar tissue and unquestioning loyalty who'd once broken a man's jaw for looking at me too long, but his eyes, small and dark beneath heavy brows, held something almost like apology. Mrs. Valentino, he said, his English heavily accented. Mr. Valentino says we leave now. You have bag packed? No. I straightened, channeling every ounce of the strength I didn't feel. I need to speak with my husband first. Tell him to come home. Marco's expression didn't change, but I saw his hand move to his phone. He spoke quietly in Italian, too rapid for my limited understanding, then returned his attention to me. Boss says no time. We go now. He meets us there. Where? Safe house, upstate. There is... situation. Not safe here anymore. What kind of situation? But I already knew. The medical records, the photos, Dr. Moreau's sudden access to the penthouse. Pieces of a puzzle I couldn't quite see clearly, but whose edges suggested something catastrophic. Marco's phone rang. He answered, listened, then held it out to me. Boss wants to talk. I took the phone with shaking hands, pressing it against my ear. Background noise had shifted. No more restaurant sounds, just the rumble of an engine, the distinctive echo of a luxury vehicle's interior. He was already on his way. Elena? Dante's voice wrapped around my name like possession itself. Marco says you're being difficult. A doctor came to see me tonight. She told me about my diagnosis, about the other women connected to your organization who mysteriously died or disappeared during treatment. I kept my voice level, though my pulse thundered. She also told me you've been intercepting my calls. Silence, heavy with calculation. Then, the doctor is a grief-stricken woman who blames everyone except her junkie daughter for her own poor choices. Whatever she told you, were you ever going to tell me? The question burned its way up my throat. Or were you just going to watch me die, like you watched her daughter die? I was protecting you. His voice shifted, taking on that dangerous softness that preceded violence. Do you have any idea what happens to women in your condition once my enemies discover the weakness? They'd use your illness against me, against us. Better you didn't know, didn't have to carry that fear. That wasn't your decision to make. Everything about you is my decision. The words hit like a slap. Your health, your safety, your life, all of it belongs to me. I've killed for you, Elena, burned down entire operations, ended bloodlines. Don't lecture me about what I owe you. Something in his tone sent ice down my spine. What do you mean you've killed for me? Another pause. In the background, I heard him speak to someone, his driver probably, redirecting their route. When he returned, his voice had shifted again, taking on an almost confessional quality. Your father, the man you thought abandoned you when you were 8. He didn't leave, Bella. He tried to take you away from your mother, away from the city, away from me. The world telescoped down to a single point of horror. What are you saying? I'm saying I found him 3 years ago, living in Oregon under a new name. I'm saying he'd been searching for you since your mother took you and disappeared. I'm saying he was 2 weeks away from finding you when I made sure he never would. Dante's voice remained perfectly calm, as though discussing the weather. You were meant to be mine, Elena. I wasn't going to let anyone take you from me. Not even the man who gave you life. The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering against marble. Marco caught it, his expression carefully neutral as he relayed something to Dante. Around me, the penthouse spun, all those expensive surfaces and carefully curated art blurring into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. My father. Dead. Because a monster had decided I belonged to him before I'd ever had a choice. I thought of the photo albums my mother kept. The ones she couldn't bear to look at anymore. My father's smile, crooked and warm, so different from Dante's calculated charm. The birthday cards I'd saved, hoping someday he'd return to explain why he'd left. All of it a lie. All of it stolen. Mrs. Valentino. Marco's voice seemed to come from very far away. We need to go now. Is not safe here. Why? I looked up at him, this man who'd enabled Dante's obsession, who'd stood guard while I'd been slowly imprisoned. Why isn't it safe? What's changed? He hesitated, conflict playing across his brutal features. Finally, Boss's wife, his first wife, she's back. The revelation hit like a physical blow. What? Katerina. She was declared dead 5 years ago before you. But she's not dead. She's been in hiding, building power, building alliances. Marco's hand moved to his weapon, an unconscious gesture. She arrived in the city 2 days ago. She wants what's hers. The territory, the business, the Valentino name. And she wants revenge on anyone who took her place. Understanding crashed over me, the increased security, Dante's paranoia, his sudden business dinners with Isabella, who'd been Katerina's closest friend before her disappearance. He wasn't having an affair. He was preparing for war, and I was the weakness his enemies would exploit. How did she die? I asked. Or how did everyone think she died? Marco's jaw tightened. Car accident. Boss identified the body himself. But the body, it wasn't her. Someone helped her fake her death. Someone close to Boss. Isabella. The name tasted like poison. We don't know yet. Boss is investigating. But yes, Isabella is suspect. That's why he took her to dinner. To watch her, to see if she makes contact with Katerina's people. My laugh came out broken, edged with hysteria. So I'm dying of cancer. My husband murdered my father and has been stalking me for years, and now his supposedly dead wife is back to reclaim her throne. Is that everything, Marco? Any other revelations you'd like to share? His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. We need to go. Now. Katerina's people just breached the building's perimeter. As if summoned by his words, the lights cut out. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing the penthouse in eerie red light that turned everything the color of blood. Somewhere below, I heard shouting, the distinctive crack of gunfire echoing up through the building's bones. Marco grabbed my arm, his grip iron hard. Stay close to me. We go to the service elevator, avoid the main corridors, but I was done running. Done being shepherded from one cage to another. I yanked free, stumbling backward. Dr. Moreau's card pressed against my skin. A small square of possibility in a world that had narrowed to impossible choices. Let me go, I said. Tell Dante I died in the attack. Tell him whatever you want. But I'm not going to your safe house, and I'm not staying here to become collateral in his war. Marco's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Mrs. Valentino, please. Boss will kill me if anything happens to you, and then he will burn down the city finding you. Then you'd better make sure he believes I'm already dead. The gunfire grew closer, a staccato rhythm that punctuated each thundering heartbeat. Marco's hand hovered near his weapon, his body angled between me and the doorway in an instinctive protective stance that would have been touching if it weren't so suffocating. You don't understand what you're asking, he said, his voice low and urgent. Boss's love for you. It's not normal love. It's the kind that destroys everything. He will never stop looking, never stop hunting. You run now. You run forever. Then I run forever. I moved toward the study's side door, the one Dr. Moreau had used. Better that than dying in a golden cage while he watches. Marco's phone erupted with rapid-fire Italian. Dante's voice, sharp with command even through the tiny speaker. Marco responded, his eyes never leaving mine, and I caught enough words to understand. She's here. She's safe. We're moving now. But his hand didn't reach for me again. Instead, he did something that shocked me more than anything else that impossible night. He stepped aside. "Service elevator is at the end of the corridor," he said quietly. "Takes you to the basement parking. There's a door marked maintenance. Goes to the alley behind the building. After that," he shrugged, a gesture heavy with unspoken consequences. "After that, you're on your own. I can give you maybe 10 minutes before I have to tell boss you ran." "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Why would you help me?" Something ancient and weary moved across his scarred face. "Because I had a sister once, and I watched her die slowly in a house that looked like a palace. Married to a man who said he loved her. She begged me to help her leave. I didn't." His jaw worked. "She died anyway. Sometimes I think she's lucky. At least her suffering ended. But Boss would keep you alive forever if he could. Even if living was torture." More gunfire, close enough now that I felt it in my chest. Shouts in Russian. Katerina's people then. Not Dante's usual Italian soldiers. The war had come home. I pulled off my wedding ring, that obscene diamond that had weighed on my finger like a shackle. Marco stared at it as I pressed it into his palm. "Tell him I left this. Tell him I said, 'What did you say to a monster who'd murdered your father and called it love?' Tell him I hope he finds whatever he's looking for. But it was never going to be me." Marco closed his fist around the ring, nodding once. Then he turned and strode toward the main corridor, his weapon drawn, his massive frame blocking the doorway as I slipped into the servants' passage. The narrow hallway was lit only by emergency strips along the floor, casting everything in ghastly green. My heels clicked against tile. Too loud, too obvious. I kicked them off, leaving behind another piece of the woman Dante had created, the polished wife in designer clothes. The carefully constructed image of devotion. The service elevator waited at the corridor's end, its doors already open as though expecting me. I jabbed the basement button, my breath coming in sharp gasps as the car descended. 23 floors down, each one taking me farther from the life I'd known, closer to something I couldn't yet name. The elevator jerked to a stop at the 15th floor. My heart seized as the doors slid open, but the hallway beyond was empty, silent, except for the building's groaning infrastructure. Then I saw it, a smear of blood on the wall, still wet, leading away from the elevator bank. The doors began to close. I stabbed the button frantically, willing them to move faster, but not before I glimpsed what lay just beyond the elevator's range. Bodies, 3 of them, wearing the black suits of Dante's security team. Katerina's people had already infiltrated the building, working their way up from below. I was running straight into their path. The basement parking garage sprawled before me like a concrete mausoleum, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Luxury vehicles lined the space, Dante's collection, each worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. The black SUV he'd picked me up in 2 years ago sat closest to the service entrance, its windows tinted dark enough to hide sins. I found the maintenance door Marco had mentioned, unmarked except for a small placard in Italian. My hands shook as I pushed it open, emerging into an alley that reeked of garbage and something sharper. Cordite, I realized, gunpowder. The battle had reached street level. Dr. Moreau's card burned against my skin. I pulled it out, squinting at the address in the dim light from a distant street lamp. Connecticut. I had no car, no money except what was in my purse, maybe $300 in emergency cash Dante allowed me to carry. No phone, because I'd left it in his study, probably already being traced by his people. A car idled at the alley's mouth, a nondescript sedan that could have belonged to anyone. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a middle-aged Hispanic man with kind eyes and a medical alert badge hanging from his rearview mirror. "Mrs. Valentino," he called softly. "Dr. Moreau sent me. I'm Dr. Ramos." I should have been more cautious, should have questioned how he knew I'd come this way, how he'd known to wait. But exhaustion and terror made fools of us all, and I was so tired of being careful, of second-guessing every instinct. I climbed into the passenger seat, sinking into fabric that smelled like coffee and old leather. Dr. Ramos pulled away slowly, his movements deliberate and calm, as though we were simply leaving a dinner party rather than fleeing a war zone. "There's a blanket in the back," he said. "Lie down on the floor until we're clear of the city. Your husband's people will be looking for you within the hour." "They're already looking." But I did as he suggested, curling onto the floor beneath a scratchy wool blanket that smelled faintly of antiseptic. Through the window above me, I watched the city lights blur past, each one a small goodbye to the life I'd known. We drove in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes. Finally, Dr. Ramos spoke. "You can sit up now. We've crossed into Connecticut." I emerged from beneath the blanket, my body aching from the cramped position. The highway stretched before us, mostly empty at this late hour. Behind us, the city glowed like a dying ember against the night sky. "Dr. Moreau told me about your daughter," I said quietly. "I'm sorry." His hands tightened on the wheel. "Maria was 26 when she died. Bright, beautiful, full of life. She married into your husband's world thinking love would protect her." He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. It never does. Love in that world is just another word for ownership. Or, "Why are you doing this? You don't know me. If Dante finds out you helped me, then I'll die." He said it simply, without drama. "But I'm 63 years old, Mrs. Valentino. I've watched too many young women waste away because powerful men decided their lives were less important than business. If I die stopping one more death, that's a trade I'll make gladly." The facility appeared an hour later, set back from the road and surrounded by tall pines. It looked nothing like a hospital, more like a private estate, all warm lights and welcoming architecture. A sign at the entrance read, "Whitmore Recovery Center," discreet enough to mean anything or nothing. Dr. Moreau met us at the entrance, her face drawn with exhaustion. "You came," she said, and something in her voice suggested she hadn't really believed I would. "Come inside. We'll start your evaluation tonight, begin treatment in the morning." But I couldn't move. Now that I was here, now that the adrenaline was fading, the reality of what I'd done crashed over me like a wave. I'd left Dante. I'd actually done it. And somewhere behind me, he was realizing I was gone. And the monster I'd married was waking to the only thing that had ever truly terrified him. Loss of control. "He'll find me," I whispered. "You don't understand. He has resources, connections. He'll burn this place to the ground." "Let him try." Dr. Moreau's voice hardened. "This facility has been protecting women from dangerous men for 30 years. We have our own security, our own protocols, and more importantly, we have the law on our side. Your husband may be powerful, Mrs. Valentino, but even he can't operate openly against a registered medical facility." She was wrong, of course. Dante didn't need to operate openly. He could destroy this place 100 different ways, none of them traceable back to him. But I was so tired, so sick, and the alternative, returning to that gilded cage, seemed worse than whatever punishment Dante would devise. Inside, the facility resembled a high-end hotel more than a medical center. Soft carpets muffled our footsteps as Dr. Moreau led me through corridors decorated with soothing artwork. Other residents passed us, women in comfortable clothes, some bald from chemotherapy, others looking relatively healthy. They nodded at Dr. Moreau with a familiarity that spoke of trust, of time spent building something more than a patient-doctor relationship. My room was on the 3rd floor, overlooking the pine forest. Dr. Moreau showed me the bathroom, stocked with toiletries and soft towels. A nightgown lay folded on the bed, next to paperwork I'd need to complete. "Rest tonight," she said gently. "Tomorrow we'll run comprehensive tests, map out your treatment plan. You're safe here, Mrs. Valentino. I promise you that." But I wasn't safe. I would never be safe again, because I knew Dante, knew the depths of his obsession. He wouldn't accept my leaving. He'd see it as theft. I was his possession, his property, and no one took what belonged to Dante Valentino without paying a terrible price. After Dr. Moreau left, I stood at the window and watched the forest sway in the night breeze. My phone was gone, cut off, but I imagined it ringing ceaselessly back in the penthouse. Imagined Dante calling my number over and over, that careful control fracturing with each unanswered ring. How long before he traced Dr. Moreau? Before he connected her to this facility? Hours? Days? I'd bought myself time, nothing more. Time to start treatment. Time to figure out what came next. Time to decide if I wanted to fight for a life that Dante had already claimed, or if it was easier to simply surrender to the cancer, to let it do what his love never could, set me free. A knock at the door startled me from my spiral. A young nurse entered, carrying a tray with soup, bread, and herbal tea. She smiled warmly, setting it on the bedside table. "Dr. Moreau said you probably haven't eaten," she said. "I'm Rebecca. I'll be checking on you tonight, making sure you're settling in okay." Her kindness nearly broke me. When had anyone last offered me food without calculation, without considering how it served Dante's purposes? I couldn't remember. Couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at me and seen a person, rather than an extension of my husband's power. "Thank you," I managed, my voice thick with unshed tears. Rebecca squeezed my shoulder gently before leaving. I sat on the bed, soft, comfortable, nothing like the silk sheets and down comforters of the penthouse, and lifted a spoonful of soup to my lips. It tasted like safety, like the beginning of something I'd thought lost forever. Outside my window, headlights appeared on the distant road. My heart stopped, muscles tensing for flight, but the vehicle passed without slowing, disappearing into the night. Not Dante. Not yet. But soon. I ate the soup slowly, forcing each bite down despite my churning stomach. I needed strength for what was coming. The treatment, the inevitable confrontation when Dante found me, the impossible choice between fighting for life and surrendering to fate. When I finally lay down, still wearing the dress I'd put on for dinner hours ago, exhaustion dragged me toward sleep. But just before unconsciousness claimed me, my mind conjured Dante's face, not the monster, but the man I'd glimpsed in rare, unguarded moments, the one who'd held me through nightmares, who'd traced my features like memorizing scripture, who'd whispered promises in Italian that I'd been foolish enough to believe. That man was a lie, had always been a lie. But God help me. Part of me still missed him. Morning arrived with clinical efficiency. Blood draws at 6, imaging scans at 7, consultations stretching through the afternoon. Dr. Moreau moved through the appointments with gentle determination, explaining each test, each finding, translating medical terminology into words that couldn't soften their meaning. Aggressive, advanced, urgent. By evening, I understood my body had been betraying me for longer than I'd known. The exhaustion, the weight loss, the night sweats, symptoms I'd dismissed as stress from living with Dante, had been cancer spreading through my lymphatic system, like poison through water. "We'll start chemotherapy tomorrow," Dr. Moreau said, her hand warm on mine as we sat in her office. "The protocol is intense. You'll spend 3 days here after each infusion, managing side effects. But you're young, relatively strong despite the disease. You have a real chance, Elena. A good chance. Elena." Not Mrs. Valentino, not Bella, not any of the possessive endearments Dante wrapped around my name like chains. Just Elena, the person I'd been before I'd made the mistake of serving wine to a monster. "What about payment?" I asked. The practical question felt absurd given everything, but necessary. "I have maybe $300 in cash. No access to bank accounts. Dante controls everything. We have a fund," Dr. Moreau said quietly. "Anonymous donations from families who've lost someone to situations like yours. Women who couldn't escape, who died because powerful men valued control over care. Your treatment is covered, Elena, all of it." The kindness undid me. Tears I'd been holding back for hours finally broke through, silent sobs that shook my shoulders. Dr. Moreau said nothing, just held my hand while I grieved. For my father, for my stolen years, for the life I'd thought I was building before cancer, and truth had torn everything down. A commotion in the hallway interrupted us. Raised voices, someone demanding entry, Rebecca's patient responses growing sharper. My blood turned to ice. "He found me," I whispered. "Dante found me already." But the man who appeared in Dr. Moreau's doorway wasn't Dante. He was younger, early 30s perhaps, with sun-streaked hair and eyes that held both authority and exhaustion. He wore a rumpled suit, and a detective's badge clipped to his belt. "Mrs. Valentino?" he said. "I'm Detective James Morrison, NYPD. I need to ask you some questions about last night." Dr. Moreau rose, positioning herself between us. "My patient has been through significant trauma and is beginning cancer treatment. Whatever questions you have can wait." "I'm afraid they can't." Morrison's gaze shifted to me, and something in his expression sent warning bells through my mind. "Mrs. Valentino, what time did you leave your penthouse last night?" "Around 9:30, maybe 10. Why? And you left alone? No one accompanied you?" "Marco, one of my husband's guards. He let me go. Told me how to reach the parking garage." Panic began creeping up my throat. "What happened? Is Marco okay?" Morrison pulled out a small notebook, flipping through pages. "Marco Benedetti was found dead in your penthouse at approximately 11 p.m. last night. Single gunshot wound to the head, execution style. 4 other bodies were discovered in the building. 3 guards on the 15th floor and a woman in the main lobby. The woman has been identified as Isabella Chen, your husband's personal secretary." The room spun. Isabella, who'd laughed in the background during my last phone call with Dante. Isabella, who might have helped his first wife fake her death. Dead because of Katerina's attack, or because Dante had discovered her betrayal. "I need to know your exact movements last night," Morrison continued. "Who you spoke with, where you went, who can verify your whereabouts." "You can't possibly think she had anything to do with this," Dr. Moreau interjected. "She came here seeking medical treatment. She's a victim, not a suspect." "I'm not accusing her of anything, but your patient is married to one of the most dangerous men on the East Coast, and 5 people are dead. I need to establish a timeline." His eyes softened slightly as they met mine. "Mrs. Valentino, I'm trying to help you, but I need the truth." So I told him. About the medical records, Dr. Moreau's visit, Marco's choice to let me escape. About my father's murder. About Katerina's return. About the war that had been building in the shadows while I'd played the obedient wife. Morrison listened without interruption, his pen moving steadily across the notebook. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Finally, "Your husband has been calling every hospital, clinic, and medical facility within a 200-mile radius. He's offering a substantial reward for information about your whereabouts. So far, this facility hasn't been contacted, but it's only a matter of time." "Then we need to move her," Dr. Moreau said immediately. "We have sister facilities, places farther from the city. Moving her makes her more vulnerable." Morrison interrupted. "Right now, she's in a registered medical facility with staff and witnesses. The moment she's on the road, she's exposed." He turned back to me. "Mrs. Valentino, I need you to consider making a formal statement about your father, about the abuse, about everything you witnessed during your marriage. With your testimony, we might finally have enough to bring charges against Dante Valentino." "You'll never make them stick," I said bitterly. "He's too careful, too connected, and without me alive to testify, any statement I make is worthless. Which is exactly why we need to ensure you stay alive." Morrison leaned forward, his intensity palpable. "I've been investigating your husband for 3 years, Mrs. Valentino. I know about the trafficking, the money laundering, the bodies that wash up in the river, but I've never been able to touch him because everyone who might talk ends up dead or disappeared. You're my first real chance at taking him down." "She's not a weapon for your case," Dr. Moreau snapped. "She's a patient who needs treatment, not to be thrown into the middle of a federal investigation." "She's already in the middle of it," Morrison's voice gentled. "Mrs. Valentino, your husband's first wife, Katerina Volkova, she surfaced because she heard you were sick. She's been building her case for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. She sees your illness as Dante's weakness, proof that he's become soft, distracted. The attack last night was just the opening move. There's a war coming, and you're the territory they're fighting over. Katerina had returned because of me, because my cancer had made Dante vulnerable. The revelation settled like lead in my stomach. What does she want? I asked. Initially, her empire back, But after last night... Morrison hesitated. After last night, I think she wants revenge. Isabella was her closest friend, the only person she trusted completely. If Dante killed Isabella, he did, I interrupted, not during the attack. He would have done it after, when he discovered she'd been helping Katerina. That's how he operates. He doesn't forgive betrayal, even from people he loves. Morrison nodded slowly. Then Katerina won't stop until Dante is dead. And anyone connected to him becomes a target. Including me. Especially you. You're the wife who replaced her, the woman Dante became obsessed with. In Katerina's mind, you're the reason for her exile, her suffering. She'll want to destroy everything Dante values. And right now, that's you. I laughed. The sound harsh and broken. He doesn't value me. He owns me. There's a difference. Not to him, there isn't. Morrison closed his notebook. Look, I can't force you to cooperate, but I can offer you protection, witness protection, if you agree to testify. A new identity, a new life, far from here. It's not perfect, but it's better than waiting for either Dante or Katerina to find you. I need to think about it, I said. I need to start treatment. Need to figure out if I'm even going to survive long enough for any of this to matter. Morrison pulled out a card, similar to Dr. Moreau's, another lifeline from another stranger. My personal cell. Call me anytime, day or night. And Mrs. Valentino? Don't wait too long to decide. The walls are closing in faster than you think. After he left, Dr. Moreau and I sat in heavy silence. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the pine forest in shades of amber and gold, beautiful, peaceful, completely at odds with the chaos swirling around us. I'm sorry, I finally said. I've brought danger to your facility, to your patients. Stop. Dr. Moreau's voice was firm. You didn't create this situation, Elena. You're a victim of it. And this facility exists precisely for women in impossible situations. We don't turn away patients because their circumstances are complicated. But if Dante comes here, then we'll deal with it. She squeezed my hand. Tomorrow we start your treatment. Today, you rest. That's all you need to focus on right now. One day at a time. But I couldn't rest. That night, lying in my narrow bed while moonlight streamed through the window, I thought about Dante, about whether he was grieving Marco's death, or simply calculating how to replace him, about whether he'd loved Isabella in his twisted way, or if her execution had been merely business, about whether he was, in this moment, thinking of me with the same obsessive focus I couldn't seem to escape. My body ached in ways that had nothing to do with cancer. I missed him, and I hated myself for it. Missed the way he'd hold me at night. His body curved around mine like a shield, missed the intensity of his attention. The way he'd look at me like I was the only thing in the world worth seeing. Missed the man I'd convinced myself he could be. If only I loved him enough, submitted enough, disappeared enough into the role of perfect wife. But that man had never existed. Had been a fantasy I'd constructed to survive living with a monster. A soft knock interrupted my spiral. Rebecca entered, carrying a small paper cup. Sleeping pill, she explained. Dr. Moreau thought you might need help tonight. I took it gratefully, swallowing the tablet with water from the bedside pitcher. Rebecca dimmed the lights, checked my vitals, then paused at the door. My sister was in your situation once, she said quietly. Different details, same cage. She got out, started over. It's been 5 years, and she's happy now. Really happy. I'm telling you this because I want you to know it's possible. Healing is possible. After she left, I let the medication pull me under, surrendering to dreamless sleep. But sometime near dawn, I jerked awake, my heart racing. The room was dark except for the red glow of the emergency exit sign above the door, and in that dim light, I could have sworn I saw a shadow move. Tall, broad-shouldered, exactly the shape of the man I'd fled. I sat up, pulse thundering. But the room was empty. The door remained closed. The shadow had been nothing more than exhaustion, and fear playing tricks. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Dante was closer than anyone realized, that he was circling, patient as a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim what he believed belonged to him. And God help me. I didn't know if I had the strength to run again when he finally came. The chemotherapy began on my third morning at Whitmore. Dr. Moreau explained the process with gentle efficiency, the cocktail of drugs that would kill rapidly dividing cells, cancer, and healthy tissue alike. My hair would fall out within weeks. I'd be nauseated, exhausted, vulnerable to infection. But I'd be alive. I'd have a chance. The infusion room overlooked the forest, sunlight streaming through windows that made the space feel less like a medical facility and more like a sanctuary. Other patients sat in recliners, IV poles beside them like faithful companions, reading or sleeping, or simply staring at the trees beyond the glass. Rebecca inserted the IV with practiced ease, her smile encouraging. "The first few hours aren't usually too bad," she said. "It's later, when the drugs really hit your system, that things get rough. But we'll be monitoring you constantly. You won't be alone." I watched the clear liquid drip into my vein, carrying poison that was somehow also salvation. This was my choice, perhaps the first real choice I'd made since agreeing to marry Dante. Not escape, not survival, but an active decision to fight for a life that belonged only to me. By evening, the nausea hit. I spent hours curled in my bathroom, Rebecca holding my hair back, her hands gentle and steady. She didn't speak platitudes or false encouragement, just stayed present while my body purged itself, rejecting the medicine that was trying to save it. "Is it always this bad?" I gasped between waves. "Sometimes worse," Rebecca admitted. "But your body will adjust, and Dr. Moreau has excellent anti-nausea protocols. We'll get you through this, Elena, I promise." 3 days passed in a haze of sickness and sleep. Dr. Moreau visited twice daily, adjusting medications, monitoring my response. Detective Morrison called once, asking if I'd made a decision about witness protection. I told him I needed more time, though we both knew time was a luxury I couldn't afford. On the 4th day, I woke feeling almost human. The nausea had receded to a manageable discomfort, and I could keep down solid food. Rebecca helped me shower, warning me to be gentle with my hair. It would start falling out soon, she said, but not quite yet. I was sitting by the window, wrapped in a blanket against the chill I couldn't seem to shake, when Dr. Moreau entered with an expression I couldn't read. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. "Dante knows you're here." My blood turned to ice. "How?" "He didn't call directly. Instead, a lawyer contacted us this morning, claiming you're mentally incompetent to make medical decisions. He's filed for emergency guardianship, arguing that your marriage gives him legal authority over your treatment. He's also threatening to sue the facility for harboring you against his wishes." "That's insane. I left willingly. I'm an adult who can make her own choices." "Unfortunately, spousal rights in medical situations are complicated, and your husband has very expensive lawyers who know exactly how to manipulate the system." Dr. Moreau sat across from me, her face drawn. "We can fight this, but it will take time. Time we may not have." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying he'll be here tomorrow for a hearing. A judge is coming to the facility to determine your competency and whether you should be released to your husband's care." She leaned forward. "Elena, you need to be very clear about your wishes. You need to tell the judge explicitly that you fear for your safety, that you left the marriage willingly, that continuing treatment here is your choice." "Will it matter? Dante owns judges, police, prosecutors. His reach—" "Not this judge." Dr. Moreau's smile was grim. "Judge Patricia Chen is Isabella's aunt, and she knows exactly what kind of man Dante Valentino is. Hope flickered, dangerous and fragile. She'll rule in my favor. She'll rule based on the law and the evidence. But yes, I believe she'll see through your husband's manipulations. The question is whether that will be enough to stop him." That night, I lay awake imagining the confrontation to come. Dante in this place of healing, contaminating it with his presence. Would he be cold, controlled, playing the concerned husband for the judge's benefit? Or would the mask slip, revealing the obsessive monster beneath? Morning arrived too quickly. Rebecca helped me dress in clothes Dr. Moreau had provided, simple slacks and a sweater that hung loose on my diminished frame. I looked like exactly what I was, a sick woman trying to survive. The hearing took place in Dr. Moreau's office, hastily converted into an informal courtroom. Judge Chen arrived first, a severe woman in her 60s, whose eyes held the same grief I'd seen in Dr. Moreau's. She'd lost her niece to Dante's world. She wouldn't forget that easily. Then he arrived. Dante filled the doorway like a storm front, all controlled power in an immaculate charcoal suit. But it was his face that broke me. Drawn with exhaustion, eyes red-rimmed as though he hadn't slept since I'd left. He looked haunted, hollowed out, a man staring at the ruins of everything he'd tried to control. Our eyes met, and I watched something crack in his expression. Not the mask, that remained firmly in place, but something deeper, something that might have been anguish, if monsters could feel such things. Elena. My name on his lips was prayer and possession in equal measure. He took a step forward, but Judge Chen's sharp voice stopped him. Mr. Valentino, please take your seat. We're here for a competency hearing, not a reunion. Dante's lawyer, a sleek woman with calculating eyes, laid out their case with clinical precision. I was mentally unstable, traumatized by the attack on our home, unable to make rational decisions about my health. My leaving had been an act of panic, not genuine choice. As my husband, Dante had both the right and responsibility to ensure I received proper care. When it was my turn to speak, I met Dante's gaze directly. Let him see what his love had cost me. I left because my husband murdered my father, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. Because he stalked me for a year before we met, orchestrated our entire relationship. Because he kept my cancer diagnosis from me, intercepted my calls, controlled every aspect of my life. I don't need his permission to seek treatment. I need protection from him. Dante's jaw tightened, but his lawyer interjected smoothly. My client denies these allegations completely. Mrs. Valentino has been under tremendous stress. Your client identified a body as his first wife 5 years ago. Judge Chen interrupted coldly. That same woman is now alive and waging war in Manhattan. Your client's secretary was found executed in his building, and you expect this court to believe Mrs. Valentino is the one who's confused? The lawyer faltered. Dante leaned forward, his voice dropping into that dangerous softness that preceded violence. May I speak, Your Honor? Judge Chen nodded curtly. Dante's eyes found mine, and I saw past the monster for a moment. Saw the man who'd held me through nightmares, who'd traced my face like scripture, who'd loved me in the only broken way he knew how. I failed you, he said simply. I thought controlling everything meant protecting you. I thought if I could just eliminate every threat, every uncertainty, you'd be safe. Happy. Mine. His voice cracked almost imperceptibly. I was wrong. About everything. About how to love you, how to keep you, how to let you be anything other than an extension of my obsession. Mr. Valentino, his lawyer began, but he waved her off. I killed your father, he continued, speaking only to me now. I told myself it was necessary, that he'd take you away before I had my chance. But the truth is, I couldn't bear the thought of you belonging to anyone else, even the man who'd given you life. I'm not asking you to forgive that. I'm not asking you to come back. I just need you to understand that everything I did, every terrible choice, came from loving you so much it destroyed my ability to think rationally. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. That's not love, Dante. That's possession. And it nearly killed me twice, once through your control, once through the disease you kept from me. I know. He looked down at his hands, those beautiful, brutal hands that had built empires and ended lives. I know what I am, Elena, what I've always been. A monster who convinced himself he could be human if the right woman loved him enough. But I'm done lying to us both. I'm done pretending this can be anything other than what it is. He stood, his lawyer protesting, but he ignored her. From his jacket, he pulled an envelope, sliding it across Dr. Moreau's desk. Divorce papers, he said. Already signed. The penthouse is yours, along with enough money to ensure you never have to think about finances again. My lawyers will handle everything. You won't have to see me or speak to me. You're free, Elena. Completely free. I stared at the envelope like it might explode. Why? Because Marco died buying you 10 minutes of freedom. Because I watched Isabella bleed out on my lobby floor and realized everyone I touch eventually dies or runs. Because you deserve a chance to live without me slowly destroying you. His smile was bitter, broken. And because I love you enough to finally let you go. Judge Chen cleared her throat. Mr. Valentino, are you withdrawing your petition for guardianship? Yes, Your Honor. My wife, my ex-wife, can make her own medical decisions. I won't interfere with her treatment or her life. You have my word. Your word means nothing in this courtroom, Judge Chen said coldly, but I'll hold you to it nonetheless. Mrs. Valentino remains at this facility voluntarily, continues her treatment as Dr. Moreau recommends, and you stay away. If you violate those terms, I'll ensure every law enforcement agency in the state knows exactly where to find you. Are we clear? Perfectly, Your Honor. He turned to leave, but I found my voice. Dante? He stopped, his shoulders tensing. Katerina, I said, she'll come for me. You know she will. She won't. His voice carried absolute certainty. I met with her yesterday, offered her everything, the territory, the business, the Valentino name, all of it, in exchange for leaving you alone. She agreed. You gave up your empire? For me? He looked back, and I saw the truth in his eyes, the depth of his obsession, the all-consuming nature of whatever twisted thing he felt. I'd give up breathing if it meant you survived, Bella. I'd burn the world down to ash if it kept you safe one more day. But since what you need is freedom from me, he shrugged. Then that's what you get, even if it kills me. Then he was gone, his presence vanishing like smoke, leaving only silence and the envelope on the desk. Judge Chen ruled in my favor, not that it mattered anymore. Dr. Moreau assured me the facility would maintain security, though Dante's promise carried more weight than any guard could. Detective Morrison called that evening, disappointed but not surprised that I wouldn't be testifying. Katerina had her empire back. Dante had disappeared, some said to Europe, others to South America. The war was over before it truly began. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later, while I was in the middle of my second chemotherapy cycle. The settlement was obscene, enough money that I'd never have to work again. Property, investments, all transferred into accounts bearing only my name. Freedom purchased with blood money, but freedom nonetheless. My hair fell out in the 4th week, coming away in handfuls that Rebecca helped me shave completely. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Bald, gaunt, marked by illness and survival in equal measure. But my eyes were my own again. That had to count for something. 6 months later, the scans came back clear. Dr. Moreau wept when she told me, her professional composure finally breaking. The cancer was in remission. I'd survived, both the disease and the monster. I moved into a small house in Vermont, far from the city and its ghosts, started painting again, something I hadn't done since before Dante. The canvases were dark at first, all shadows and cages and chains, but slowly, color crept back in. Light found its way into the corners. I never heard from Dante again. Some nights I'd wake thinking I felt his presence, that obsessive attention that had once defined my existence. But he kept his word, stayed away even as his absence became its own kind of haunting. I learned to live with both, the ghost of who I'd been and the woman I was slowly becoming. Rebecca visited sometimes, bringing news from Whitmore, new patients arriving, finding sanctuary, starting over. Dr. Moreau had established a foundation in her daughter's name, expanding the network of facilities helping women escape impossible situations. On the first anniversary of my leaving, a package arrived. No return address, but I knew immediately who'd sent it. Inside was a single painting, one I'd created years ago and sold at a gallery show, long before I'd met Dante, a self-portrait, me laughing in sunlight, free and whole and unburdened. The note read simply, "This is how I'll always remember you. D." I hung it in my studio, a reminder of what I'd been and what I'd survived, proof that even monsters could learn to let go, if they loved someone enough. Even if that love was twisted and obsessive and wrong in every possible way. I was 31 years old. I'd survived cancer, survived a monster's love, survived everything that should have destroyed me. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and terrifying, and completely my own. And for the first time in 3 years, I could breathe without fear strangling every breath. The sun set beyond my window, painting the Vermont hills in shades of gold and amber. I picked up my brush and returned to the canvas I'd been working on. Not darkness this time, but light. Always moving toward light, even when shadows threatened to pull me back. I was alive. I was free. And that was enough.